Okay, so morning everyone. It's 10:06 on the Saturday 31st of October, and we're chuffed that you're joining us for our In Conversation with Stevan Jackson. I'm Angela Podmore. I set up my own communications business, but the Business Book Club is for the Hive, and it's a labour of love, and it's ably facilitated by the Kickstarter that is Anita Kiss from the Business and IP Centre at the Hive. Over to you, Anita, for the etiquette, please.
Thank you, Ange. Good morning, everyone, and welcome on behalf of the Hive and Worcestershire Libraries to our monthly business book club, where we put a spotlight on an entrepreneur and then talk about books that have made them into the person they are today. So facilitated brilliantly by Angela this morning, as every month. The etiquette is that we normally ask people to mute themselves if possible, please, just so that we get best sound quality. And then at the end, we'll stop recording the session and you can unmute yourselves and jump in with questions and comments if you will. And if along the way you've got any questions or comments or any technical difficulties, please use the chat facility and I'll be keeping an eye on that.
We want to make the next half an hour a force for good. We want it to inspire your business thinking so that you leave dancing like the trees with their amber, red and gold leaves. And this morning we're in conversation with Steve Jackson. Steve's an accomplished business leader with years of experience at the most senior levels. He and I met through Vistage, which is where he is now a coach, and Vistage gives business leaders vital perspectives on their decisions, as well as he creates a place where leaders can test ideas and overcome obstacles, seize opportunities and get personal and business growth as well. And his working life started underground. He was a miner, a coal miner for 35 years before joining the Royal Navy, where he rose to the rank of captain during a range of demanding jobs at sea, ashore and abroad. And he has led numerous expeditions to climb the world's largest mountains. He founded a business called Bavaria in Leeds to develop leadership and team working skills for clients, including Unilever, Northern Foods, Leeds City Council and University, and he sold that business in 2020. In 2010, he created the Royal British Legion's Residential Recovery Centre for servicemen and women with life-changing injuries, and over 6,000 have benefited to date. He's got a master's from Lancaster in 2015. He lectures at Leeds Trinity University. His ebook, Clinical Leadership, was launched by the Princess Royal, and before Vistage, he was CEO of Mary Stephen's Hospice, where he led a team of 685 staff and volunteers and caring for people with progressive illness, and every year he had to raise £3.5 million to fund those services. So in the next 30 minutes, Steve is going to share how he thinks by sharing his reading list with us. He's going to share the books that have stayed with him and the reasons why. So come on, Steve, over to you. Which books are you taking to your desert island?
Yeah, thank you very much, Angela. And as you can tell from the things that Angela's described, I am in fact 127 years old. Actually, I was a coal miner for 2 years and I was in the Navy for 35 years. But thanks, that was a great introduction. Well, I'm going to start with my university career. I didn't go to university until I was 59. I left it a bit late. I was too busy. And I did a master's degree in leadership at Lancaster University Business School. And it was there that I was introduced to the first book that I'm going to talk about, which is Jim Collins' Good to Great, very well known. He wrote it in 2001, and Jim Collins is actually now working very closely with Vistage, with whom I work, but I'm not going to mention much about Vistage today. That's not why we're here. And in his book, Collins explains that not all leaders behind the great companies are well known or high profile. It does identify characteristics that are commonly found among the most successful leaders. And Collins describes that as a ferocious resolve and almost stoic determination to do whatever needs to be done to make the company great. And Collins calls these people level 5 leaders. They're individuals who blend extreme personal humility with intense professional will. And he says that the success begins with good leaders. And he's outlined some characteristics which I rather like, and I'm trying to incorporate into my own practice. So first of all, great leaders need to be humble, modest, and care more about the company's growth than their personal growth. A great leader needs to engage your team, your workers, with questions instead of answers. And here's a freebie book. So there's a little book by Greg Bustin called That's a Great Question from 2012. And if you have a look at that, you'll never be short of questions. Collins also said that you need to have the right people in the right positions, which is key. And one of the expressions that he used, which you will have used or heard certainly, is he said, I know this, if we get the right people on the bus in the right seats and the wrong people off the bus, then we'll figure out how to take it somewhere great. And my opinion is, and I have had the experience of it, and I can't say that I've actually enjoyed it, but you sometimes need to get some people off the bus and some people need to go under the bus. Collins also says you should look for character over skills and education. You can't teach character, but you can provide education and training. So my view is recruit on attitude and then train the people to do the job you want them to do. If you've got any doubts, don't hire them. Don't give people false hopes. That only demotivates them. And he also talks about the hedgehog paradox, which essentially is about hedgehogs. They have got down to an absolute art, simplifying life into one unifying concept. You know, hedgehogs are really very simple. You know, eat, sleep, breathe. That's it. Don't do anything else. Focus on simplifying your business. Create a workplace culture that avoids bureaucracy and hierarchy. My last organisation was pretty flat organisation. You know, it's difficult sometimes if you're a business leader, but your door should be open. Allow freedom and responsibility. Don't hire good people and tell them what to do. Hire good people, excuse me, so they can tell you what to do. And ensure that people are self-disciplined. Now, I'm obviously going to say that. You know, I was in the Royal Navy for 35 years. But if you do allow freedom and responsibility, my view is you'll inspire a culture that's creative and hardworking. And remain focused. Only work on the relevant work. Don't take on any fluff. Don't get distracted. It's easy to do that. Focus on the target. So that's the first book. And I'll finish with a quote actually from Collins on that. He said, of good to great companies, on the one hand, leaders stoically accepted the brutal facts of reality. You know, where are we now? On the other hand, they maintained an unwavering faith in the end game. Where are we going? And a commitment to prevail as a great company, despite the brutal facts. He refers to them regularly as the brutal facts. And he said that he came to call this duality the Stockdale paradox. Now, which leads me very neatly into my...
You should be a DJ. That segues beautifully onto your second choice, Mr. Jackson.
You missed that out. I was a DJ at Mansfield Pally for 4 years. Right, so that brings me on to Thoughts of a Philosophical Fighter Pilot by Jim Stockdale. Okay, now for those of you who don't know Jim Stockdale, I have to be very careful here that I don't get emotional, because Jim Stockdale was Admiral Jim Stockdale, as he later became, was a US naval aviator. He was an officer. He was a fighter pilot. I was, I served in HMS Ark Royal, which is the ship behind me, which is a fixed wing aircraft carrier 2 Ark Royals ago. And it's an exciting, interesting, extremely dangerous place for 3,000 people to work, launching fighter pilots, fighter planes, bombers, and so on and so forth. And after 2 years, it was my first ever sea job. I was a medic. After 2 years there, nothing was ever difficult because I'd seen it all. Now, Jim Stockdale was shot down during the Vietnam War, and he was imprisoned in the Hanoi Hilton prisoner of war camp from 1965 to 1973. He had no release date. He had no certainty as to whether he would survive to see his family again. He also, because he was the highest ranking officer there, he shouldered the burden of command. And he did everything he could to create conditions that would increase the number of prisoners who would survive unbroken. Surviving is one thing, surviving unbroken is a different thing, as I have seen in the centre that I set up for wounded, injured and sick servicemen and women, mostly from Iraq and Afghanistan, which is at Lilleshall, near Telford. Stockdale was asked a question by Jim Collins. He said, at one stage, he said, who didn't make it out? Because the story is, it's worth reading, the story is phenomenal, but who didn't make it out? And Stockdale said, oh, that's easy. He said, the Optimists.
Which is totally counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah. And he said, I don't understand. He said, the Optimists. He said, they were the ones who said, we're going to be out by Christmas, and Christmas would come and Christmas would go. Then they say, we're going to be out by Easter, and Easter would come and Easter would go. And then Thanksgiving, and then it'd be Christmas again. And they died of a broken heart. And he said, this is a very important lesson. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. So, the image I've got is Stockdale saying to the Optimists, we're not getting out by Christmas, deal with it.
Yeah.
Which I think reflects very well on our current times. Right, my next choice of book, and I have two versions here, is the Bible of Vistage, is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And there's also another version, actually. So that was 2002, Patrick Lencioni. And there's this version of it, which is a cartoon version, actually. So it's the same book, but done in cartoon form.
Can we have that version, please, Anita, at the Hive?
Yeah, and it's
I'll see what I can do, Ange.
Yeah, a lot of business leaders are business leaders because they didn't fit into the corporate mold, and they may have learning difficulties, and if cartoons helps them.
Yeah. Well, it's illustrated by Kensuke Okabayashi, and it's actually that's the version I read because I've got a very low attention span, the attention span of a butterfly. And what Lencioni said is great teamwork is what makes a powerful competitive advantage. All business looking for a competitive advantage, but it is very rare because organizations have a hard time excuse me, avoiding the natural dysfunctions that teams face. And the basis of great teamwork is building trust, engaging in constructive conflict, and then committing to decisions, holding peers accountable, that's holding each other accountable, and focusing on common goals. So there's a bit of a theme developing here from what Collins was saying. So the 5 dysfunctions of a team, I'll tell you what they are. It's the bottom is absence of trust. Without trust, you're going nowhere. You think about the people that you know and respect, and that's probably because you trust them. Fear of conflict stops people from interacting effectively. We talk about conflict in the workplace. Conflict's good. Conflict and tension creates innovation. So it's the grit in the oyster that produces the pearl. But if you get grit in your shoe, you get a blister, and I'd rather have a pearl than a blister. So So don't be afraid of conflict, but use it effectively.
Constructively.
Yeah. The third dysfunction is a lack of commitment. So this is people being ambiguous, not committing. Then avoidance of accountability. So that's, you know, having low standards, letting things slide. You know, allowing people to have their telephone on and text during a meeting, that sort of thing. Don't do it. And then finally, inattention to results, and that's largely to do with status and ego, and that's where you go down. That's where the top of the slippery slide that your business will go down if you have inattention results. So, excuse me. Okay, my fourth
You
book.
need a glass of water, Steve. You need,
Yeah.
you need a mess man.
Sorry, I do. Yeah, a petty officer steward to bring me a cup of tea. Right, no, we've stopped doing that.
This is golden stuff, though. Jim Collins, Patrick
Yes.
Lencioni.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
Jim
I'm now going to
Stockdale.
talk about the golden circle, and we hadn't even rehearsed, which is start with why, and which is Simon Sinek. His most recent book is Leaders Eat Last, which is something, if you've ever read General Slim's book about Burma, you will understand where Simon Sinek got the expression leaders eat last. That's one of the things from the armed forces. You must make sure that your team, I would have said men in the past, but it's now mixed. So your team are fed, watered and bedded down before the officers are, which is one of the things that some of our opposition didn't do, and they lost. Start with why, 2009. If you can't be bothered to read the book, go to the TEDx talk by Simon Sinek. He's got more than one. Fabulous. And it's a really very simple concept, if I'm honest, to do with the golden circle. At the middle of it is why. So that's where you start. But the middle is why. Then you've got how. Then you've got what. And all businesses know what they do. You know, they can describe their product or their service, but that doesn't actually really tell you anything. Some companies know how they do what they do, and they know they're different, so they have a unique selling point. And so good examples of that are Domino's Pizza. You know, you get fresh hot pizza delivered to your door in 30 minutes or less, or it's free. FedEx Corporation, when it's absolutely positively has to be there overnight. That's their unique selling point. And then the one I particularly liked was Avis, because they turned what looked like a negative quality into a benefit. So their unique selling point is we're number 2.
Yes. Go on, explain.
We try harder. So Avis was in the position of being the second largest car rental company because Hertz is the number 1. And in fact, Avis was having trouble just staying solvent. So they decided it was time for a total image makeover, and they hired the famous American ad agency, Doyle Bain Bernbach, to come up with a new ad campaign to get the company out of the hole they were in. And the We Try Harder campaign was so successful that Avis's market share went from 11% to 35% in 4 years.
What I love about Sinek is he says, he makes it all so simple, doesn't he? And he says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, as you've so ably explained.
Yeah.
But he also says about it goes to the emotional brain, doesn't it? You know, it's all happening up here, but it's in your limbic brain, and it's really deconstructed it. But he's an ex-military man, isn't he, Steve? He's ex-Marines, isn't he?
All the best people are.
And by the way, that video that Steve's referencing you to on YouTube, it's called Start With Why, and I think the 5-minute one has had 50 million views. 50 million people, can't be wrong.
Probably not. Okay, which leads me on to my 5th book, so we're halfway through. So, High Output Management, Andrew S. Grove, from 1983. Not that well known, I don't think. However, the important thing there is 1983. So apart from Drucker, Peter Drucker, in the 60s, who's the sort of godfather of business management understanding, Drucker it was who coined the phrase culture eats strategy for breakfast. So but if you look at all these books by Jim Collins and Covey and Goleman on emotional intelligence and so on and so forth, Simon Sinek, they all come after 1983, well after, 20 years later. And so I think, having only just come across this in the last 2 years, what Grove did has clearly permeated through a lot of these into these people's perception.
We're all standing on the shoulders of giants. Is that the point you're making, that they all build on one another?
Yeah. Well, for me, the appeal, bearing in mind, I was a coal miner for a couple of years and going nowhere. The two things I'd said in my life I'd never do was go down the pit, which all my family did, or join the Navy. So after 2 years at Thorsby Colliery, I joined the Navy. So in that regard, my life has been a complete failure. Now, Grove's appeal to me is his rags to riches immigrant story. So he was a survivor of the Nazi Holocaust and the '56 Soviet invasion of Hungary, lived in Budapest. He arrived in the United States as a penniless youth, spoke little English, and had a very severe hearing loss, which wasn't corrected until after many, many operations many years later. But within decades, he was the CEO of Intel in Silicon Valley. And he was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And in 1997, he was chosen Man of the Year by Time magazine for being the person most responsible for the amazing growth in the power and the innovative potential of microchips, which is all to do with taking sodium imperfections out of the silicon chips. But I won't bore you with that. He had a creative confrontational style. It was described as creative confrontation. So his view was it's better for employees to get in shouting matches and solve problems quickly. But the most shouting was done by Mr. Grove, who was named in 1984 by Fortune magazine of one of the country's toughest bosses. One of the people, his chief executive, said Mr. Grove's management style was to hit you over the head with a 2x4. But those who survived the grueling pace, because he made people work very long hours, and they were amply rewarded. And when they reached a market valuation of more than 500 billion in 2000, several thousand of his employees became millionaires by exercising their stock options. I would recommend reading that book, if only to understand how you might not want to run your business. But
I was going to say, hasn't business changed from that? There's no way a modern leader would get away with hitting people over the head with a 2x4, as in metaphorically or not.
I think that was metaphorically speaking. You're absolutely right.
No,
okay.
But also that sounds like quite a bullying culture, which is exactly what all this mental health and well-being is about. And I think the workplace is a more positive place as a result. But having said that.
Yeah, well, once again, Angela, you read my mind, and so I'm going to segue slightly away from some of these intense business books into something a little more emotional, which is a book that I use regularly. You can see because it's quite tattered actually, but this is condensed chicken soup for the soul. You can find the book Chicken Soup for the Soul. There's also I think there's a second helping of Chicken Soup for the Soul and a third serving. So it's a nice little handily sized book which I use to find comfort and solace. So I practice mindfulness, I meditate, I find those useful ways of relieving myself of the stress and strains of business life. Because it can be emotionally draining being a business leader. And you can find there's all sorts of different stories, poems, in the book, which can give you a helpful escape from the day-to-day stresses and strains. And I'm going to read you a short poem, very short poem. It's called Autobiography in 5 short chapters by Portia Nelson from 1994. So, autobiography in 5 short chapters. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it's my fault. I still take a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall. It's it. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It's my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street.
Brilliant, yeah.
Okay. Staying on what is a very important area, but again, slightly moving off of these intense business books, is a book which has a title which somebody actually once said to me. I was doing some research during my master's degree at Lancaster University. I was doing some research into leadership. I was looking at qualitative aspects of leadership, and I was allowed to interview senior managers of a major defence contractor, which I knew that they build things for the Royal Navy in the Northwest. So I'm not going to say any more than that because I don't want to identify them. But I was interviewing this lady, and she said, I am a peacock in the land of penguins. And that's what this book is called, by Haitley and Schmidt from 1995. And it's actually, just to give you a clue as to the quality of this book, I mean, the foreword is by Ken Blanchard, who you may have heard of, may be familiar with, as he wrote The 1 Minute Manager. And what this lady said to me was, she said, I'm a peacock in the land of penguins. She had read the book. I had never heard of it. And I said, what do you mean? And what she described was she'd been recruited because she was fantastic at what she did. She's very high profile. In project management terms, she was critical path analyst, and she ran multi-million-pound software with a big team, which could measure whether or not the project, and that's all I'll call it, was still on its critical path and was going to be delivered in time. And there were multiple projects within the project. And she was, she'd been recruited because she was bright. She was, an Oxbridge graduate. She was effective. And she was, I think, the only female amongst the senior leadership team, which was quite big. So it lacked diversity for a start. And she said, well, they liked me when I first came here, but actually now they want me to be like them. And she said that she would go to meetings and she'd run her program, and she'd got the absolute facts as to whether this project, multi-billion-pound projects, were on track. And she would say no, and then she'd say, yeah, but the project lead would say, no, we sat down this morning for half an hour, and I've just worked out on the back of this fag packet that we're okay. And they go, yeah, fine, okay, we'll carry on. And she described that, and that's what it describes in this book, which I would strongly recommend, particularly not just to everybody, but it's an interesting reading, and being taken seriously. And
but also for anybody who feels like a fish out of water, is that the expression?
Well, I think she was a fish very much in water. She was very much somebody who knew what she was talking about, but you've got to be taken seriously and trusted and respected by those with whom you work. Great. Also, the thing about cognitive diversity is Matthew Syed. So it's a free book. Matthew Syed, Rebel Ideas, Cognitive Diversity. It's important to have people with different opinions, different experiences, able to trust and communicate so that you get better decisions. You know, the diverse your board is, the better your decisions will be. Okay, so book number 8. This is QF 32. Qantas Flight 32. Richard de Crespigny from 2012. And Crespigny is of Huguenot origin, whose family ended up in Australia. And I'll just read you the 2 testimonials on the back of the book, because that'll tell you everything you need to know about why you might be excited to read this book. Neil Armstrong, who I don't need to explain to you who Neil Armstrong was, I hope. My greatest hero as a child of the 60s. Neil Armstrong said, "This is a gripping tale of overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds. Richard de Crespigny recounts a hair-raising story of responsibility and complexity as he brings 469 passengers and crew safely to Earth after encountering one of the most catastrophic in-flight disasters in aviation history." And this was a flight from Singapore to Sydney. And Sully, Chesley Sullenberger, played by Tom Hanks in the film Sully, said, "A compelling journey of leadership and resilience. I'd been in the captain's seat myself when things go catastrophically wrong, and Richard's description of a well-trained crew acting to save lives gives a unique insight into how experience and judgment can avert a disaster. Anyone who is flown or is about to fly should read this remarkable story." I couldn't put it down. And I'm also delighted to say that I got this personally from Richard de Crespigny, who signed it for me when I was doing my master's at leadership, and said, "I hope this helps your master's dissertation," because I used it in my as part of my research.
Steve, I'd love to see that. You know how I study handwriting as a hobby? That is massively optimistic, by the way it's on the slant, but also he's a very deep guy, isn't he? And also very emotionally responsive. Was he very warm?
Brilliant. He said, "Good luck with your master's degree in leadership. I hope you enjoy my story, and I hope it helps."
Yeah. If anybody wants isn't it amazing you're drawing these parallels between bringing a flight in safely and business, but there are so many parallels, Steve?
Well, Black Box Thinking, Matthew Syed, his book before Rebel Ideas was similarly, we know what a black box is, and it's about, Black Box Thinking is well worth a read. Another £1 million. I don't personally know Matthew Syed, but I'm connected to him and have had exchanges with him. And he was the guest speaker 2 weeks ago at our Vistage Executive Summit and was absolutely outstanding. He's got TEDx talks, which I would recommend. So my final 2 books. One is a book that took me, I think, about a year to read, because I read about 4 or 5 books at a time, and I often read them. So I go to bed and I'll read for 20 minutes, half an hour before I go to sleep. And one of the most recent ones I've finished was Andrew Roberts' single-volume biography of Churchill. That there are other biographies, a number of other biographies of Churchill, but this one is particularly good. And Simon Heffer, who's a writer I respect in the Daily Telegraph, said the best single volume life imaginable. So what's interesting about Churchill is, irrespective of the fact that people are trying to pull his statue down in Westminster, in a survey in 2008 of 3,000 British teenagers, a survey of 3,000 British teenagers, 20% thought that Winston Churchill was a fictional character. 58% thought Sherlock Holmes, and 47% thought Eleanor Rigby were real people.
Oh, right.
Which I think says something about how history
Yes.
is taught in our schools. But in the summary, I mean, this is an enormous book, you know, I mean, look how thick it is. You know, it's thicker than I am. And what the summary, which I rather like, is Robert said, by virtue of his dash, intelligence, hard work, persistence, immense physical and moral courage, and above all an iron willpower, Churchill succeeded despite parental neglect, the disapproval of contemporaries, a prison incarceration, a dozen close brushes with death, political criticism, financial insecurity, military disaster, press and public ridicule, backstabbing colleagues, continual misrepresentation, and even from some, decades of hatred, among countless other setbacks, which is putting it mildly. But Churchill believed that with enough spirit, we can rise above anything and create something truly magnificent of our lives. And so my final choice, a book. Well, I was spoiled for choice. I'm an avid, massive, huge fan of various sports, so I could have chosen Mike Brearley, The Art of Captaincy, which is a great book for any leader to read. But Brearley wasn't the best cricket player. I mean, he wouldn't have got in the side, to be honest, for you know, with some of his performances. But actually, there has not been a better England cricket captain by all accounts ever. I could, of course, have chosen Clive Woodward, now Sir Clive, book Winning, the story of the 2003 Rugby World Cup win, Johnny Wilkinson and co, which is something I still look at the pictures from time to time. I'm a massive, massive rugby fan. I played in the front row for 15 years until I broke my neck, and played at a decent standard. Alex Ferguson, Sir Alex Ferguson, leading. Now, I didn't always like Sir Alex Ferguson, but I don't support any Premier League football team. I certainly don't support Manchester United, but I like Sir Alex Ferguson, and the way in which he was a fantastic manager. And it was men, because obviously it was all men in the football team. So another American book, which I love American football. If you like rugby and you get American football, I love that. So Bill Walsh, The Score Takes Care of Itself. That actually tells you something about the concept. You know, if you do things right and you do the right things, as we've, you know, as Jim Collins was saying, and Simon Sinek was saying, you know, the score will take care of itself. If you're doing the right stuff, the score will take care of itself.
Steve, who coined the phrase "systems beat goals"? Do you know?
No. If I was guessing, I'd maybe say Drucker, but I would be guessing. Off the top of my head.
Sorry, carry on.
Right, now,
yes.
now the other book I would recommend to you is Mountaineering, Training and Preparation. And the reason for that is because there's a fantastic chapter on team selection, 10,000 words on how to select a team and lead them to the most difficult of activities, which is climbing one of the hardest routes on one of the world's highest mountains. And it's by Stevan Jackson.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, is that all of them, Steve, or is there more?
No.
My final book is. Give a quick round of applause now, team. Well done, Steve. Okay. That was just superb. Thank you. Oh, When Pride Still Mattered. Who's that?
No, my final book is When Pride Still Mattered, and it's the life of Vince Lombardi by David Moranis, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning author. And again, what appeals to me, and so there's a bit of a theme here, is Lombardi, Vince Lombardi, Italian immigrant from butchers. His father was an Italian butcher who emigrated to the United States, and they lived in the Bronx, and very close knit. And Vinny Lombardi. So the Super Bowl, you will have heard of the Super Bowl, I imagine. You know, they call it the World Championship, but it's only in America. They play for the Vince Lombardi Trophy. That's what they play for. He transformed football into a metaphor of the American experience. So, you know, he toiled for 20 years in college football, and then as an assistant coach, Fordham, who are well known, and the New York Giants. He didn't get his big break until he was 46. And that was at a really struggling, terrible team, the Wisconsin Green Bay Packers. And he led them to 5 world championships in 9 years. And he did it by utilizing all of those characteristics that we've described earlier during this talk and employing them. He got the right people. He drilled them. He rehearsed them time and time and time again. He got the message really simple. Everybody knew what they were going to do. It's called the Packer sweep. You know, if you Google the Packer sweep, they'll tell you exactly. Everybody knows what they're going to do because they do it all the time. And yet they couldn't stop it because they did it so well. It's the hedgehog complex. You know, let's get this really simple and let's repeat it and do it. Let's not try all this fancy faffing, throwing the ball down the park all the time. But he also empowered his team to change the calls. He also simplified the calls. The calls could be quite complex. You know, when you see the quarterback standing there and the center's about to snap the ball and he's going, orange, green, Indiana, 42, reverse, 987, up. Yeah. The Packers call was 49. And that was it. And it was player number 4 was going to go through hole number 9. It was really simple. And everybody knew that, but they couldn't stop it. And he won 5 out of 9. They were a terrible team when he went there. They just sacked Scooter McLean, their coach, because he was too easygoing. He let things slide. So the Packers became an absolute phenomenon, and the cheeseheads, as they call themselves now, they'll go there with huge cheeses on their heads with holes in them. And so I admire Vince Lombardi for the way in which he did himself up by the bootstraps. So that's it. That's my book.
Oh, Steve, thank you so much. I could listen to you all day long, but we're trying to keep this under the hour, and that's going to be quite an achievement this morning. Anita, do we have any questions?
Yes, thank you very much, Steve. That was very inspiring. What an amazing way to spend my Saturday morning. So I'm going to stop recording now. Thank you to everybody who's watching at a later date, so that we can take